Once I reach 1,000 subscribers, I will always have a live chat on the first Friday of the month at 8 p.m. So please subscribe, click on the bell, and let's get 1,000 subscribers very soon. Good morning and welcome back to Planet Althistory. Today we are going to discuss what if Charlemagne married Irene. Charlemagne is a well-known personality, and I guess most people who watch my videos have come across his name a few times. As a result, I would like to talk about Irene. Irene, she was the Empress of Byzantium. Irene was born in Athens sometime between 750 or 755. She was also a member of the noble Greek Sarantapechos, and they had a significant political influence in central mainland Greece. She was an orphan, but through her uncle it is known that she was part of this patrician family. She was selected by Emperor Constantine V to marry Leo IV. When Leo IV died on the 8th of September 780, she became the regent of her son Constantine VI. As Irene's son Constantine reached maturity, he began to move out from her influence, and also in the early 790s, several attempted revolts tried to proclaim her son as a sole ruler. In 797, Irene gouged out her son's eyes, maiming him so severely that he died a few days later. What a good mother. With her dead son, Irene proclaimed herself as a sole ruler, the Empress. This apparently led the Pope Leo III to proclaim Charlemagne as Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, whatever. A revolt in 802 overthrew Irene, and she was then exiled to Lesbos and died there in less than a year. But what if all of that changed? What if Charlemagne married Irene? Originally there were plans to marry the daughter of him and the son of her together, but these plans were for some reasons annulated. In 787 both also formed an alliance, and Irene was in need of such an alliance, as many of the Byzantine elite they opposed her rule. By marrying Charlemagne, multiple options open up. The first one would be that when she marries him, the Byzantine elite rises up and Irene will effectively go into exile. Depending on how different everything goes, she might try to recapture Constantinople or not, and history would be pretty much the same as in OTL with minor changes. The second option is that Irene manages to play the elite out against each other, and thus rebellions would be very minor, promising to some generals higher positions or salaries, promising to the bureaucrats also certain things, and so on and so forth. It would effectively weaken the rule of a Byzantine emperor in the long term, but in the short term she would still be an empress. Charlemagne won't have the same rights as her within Byzantium, as she won't have the same rights like him within the Frankish Empire. Within the next few years, efforts will be made that both empires will share a common border. The Franks will probably invest more into it as they are closer to Byzantium. Also their manpower is much bigger, and also they would face less troubles than Byzantium, although both of them will face troubles nonetheless. Moreover, it was more to Charlemagne's advantage to do this because he wanted to be recognized as the emperor by Eastern Rome as well, which at this point was partially right, because well, after he married Irene, he was not really popular, and nor was she, so Irene would still do the same as in OTL with her son, but Charlemagne also had a son, and now the question is, how would his son, Charlemagne's son, later on be accepted as an emperor of Byzantium? But the question that we also have to ask is if he might even be accepted as emperor of Byzantium. Well, when Charlemagne dies, let's say Irene still lives for a few more years, and she would somehow adopt Louis the Pious, who was the son of Charlemagne, in one way or another, and Louis the Pious would not kill Irene because he would know that she's the only chance to get him somehow the title of the emperor in the East as well. In OTL, many kings of the HRE, they went to Rome, but not peacefully, but by force. They took their units, cavalry, infantry, and forced their way through northern Italy. Thus, it is not far-fetched to imagine something similar in this case, but instead of going to Rome, Louis the Pious would go to Constantinople. In OTL, he was married to his wife Ermengarde up until the death of her, and after 818 he would then find a Byzantine noblewoman, which he would then marry. All of this would happen around the same moment, and it would strengthen Louis' reputation in a way. In our modern history writing, he is described indirectly as weak and having issues, but if he could force his way to Constantinople, more people would respect him, but at the expense of some border regions of his empire, or his empires. Now we know that Louis the Pious, he died in 840, and the Frankish Empire was divided among his sons. In this ATL, he would have to send his sons as military leaders to fight in Brittany or other parts of the frontier to prove their worth. They would do so, and by some chance or maybe misfortune they would die, and a common son between Louis the Pious and the Byzantine noblewoman could, with 19 or 20 years, inherit then both thrones. But again, it would create a lot of chaos. Such an union would be powerful on the paper, but in reality both empires, they would have civil wars, their own border wars going on, and it's very much impossible that the Frankish Empire and the Byzantine Empire would somehow unite. But yet again, we are having two outcomes which I could propose to you in this scenario. And I mean, all of this scenario is basically ASB, because to have Louis the Pious and then marrying a Byzantine noblewoman and all of that, it's already too far. But anyways, let's continue this thought experiment. The first outcome is that after more and more time has passed, the Muslims would have been a bit more successful in this timeline, as would be the Bulgars, the Slavic population within the Frankish Empire, and the border regions in Brittany and Iberia. For the upcoming years, both empires would decline, but due to their common enemies and their main focus in outer threats, it might have led into an actual union between the Frankish and the Byzantine Empire. And at some point, competent military leaders could have secured some parts of the empire. The eastern frontier in the 10th century would be secured, as could Iberia and Brittany with more manpower. Bulgaria could be crushed, and the Slavic revolts as well. When both empires would become stable and unified, Italy would be totally taken and be freed from the Saracens. Al-Andalus would still decline and get divided into these different taifas, and the Neo-Roman Empire at this moment would be able to take Iberia back step by step, together with the Christian kingdoms in the north. And the Crusades in this timeline, they would be more successful, and they would be also much, much bigger. No crusade ever would go to Byzantium and then destroy Constantinople, and the Crusades would secure Jerusalem, for instance, and also other more important parts of the Middle East for at least some time. Eastern Europe would also get the full force of the Crusades in this timeline. If Poland exists and converts, it would have helped the Neo-Roman Empire to convert the Baltics and unconverted parts of the Kievan Rus. The Seljuks could have been beaten, and the Mongols would yet again reach only Poland, but not much further. And the only difference we would have with such a Neo-Roman Empire is feudalism. And feudalism would still exist in this timeline, and it is very difficult to predict if this Neo-Roman Empire would become something akin to the HRE, or if it would be totally divided, or if the laws of the succession would still be the same as with Charlemagne's son, Louis the Pious, or if something else would arise. It's at this point too difficult to predict how it would change, and also probably the discovery of the Americas would be postponed. And for real, at this point in this first outcome, I have no idea how this scenario could continue. The second outcome is a very interesting one, because just remember one thing. All the religious wars that happened in Byzantium with iconoclasm and so on, there were so many different subparts of Christianity which are so difficult to grasp. And imagine you have this conflict kinda in the air of the iconoclasts, because it was just recently somehow solved by the husband of Irene, I think, or I think it was her husband. And now also you have then all of this union, which then eventually fails, because to keep such a union together, you really need to be accepted by both sides, and both sides, they all had their problems. And due to the opposition then of the Byzantine nobles, and also the Frankish nobles, the East and West schism that would still happen, it is very likely that some of these nobles, in order to differentiate themselves from the rulers who are on the top, they would adopt one of these various sects that would pop up suddenly. Because remember, in those years, it was not only that suddenly you had Catholicism and Orthodoxy, and then much later you had Protestantism. No, there was a lot going on in those years. The clergy could gain more power by influencing those noblemen, and also they would then use these tactics of divide and conquer. The political landscape of Europe and of the world would be totally unpredictable. But I imagine there are few pockets of Orthodoxy and Catholicism which would exist, maybe even bigger areas, while a Bogomilist Bulgaria would be a thing, or potentially a Bogomilist Balkans. A Qatar southern French theocracy, a much earlier and a bigger papal state, and then some Waldensian state as well, and many more duchies that would belong to some other obscure sect, or that they would still follow Catholicism. We don't know what might have happened. But these theocracies, they could then evolve to not have a king and a priest separately, or a duke, if you rather want to have a duke, but they would get some type of a king-priest who would then unify both positions. The head of state would become also the head of religion, of the church. But he would be able to still put his own son on the throne. Because I guess with all these problems of succession and all of this division that would happen in such a timeline, at one point they would then decide that the ruler would then just give all of this to his son, because it would make the succession much easier. I think that Europe's Dark Age would continue for a much longer time in this alternate timeline and outcome 2. And eventually, if there is the discovery of the Americas, England, Spain and Portugal, they would take advantage of it, while mainland Europe would be very different. There would be no Germany, there would be no France, and with a lot of luck, a papal Italy would be a thing and become the actual successor of Rome, of the Western Roman Empire, while Byzantium would fall much earlier in this timeline. And I think that a Bogomilist Bulgaria, they would actually become the superpower in the east. And who knows, maybe Bogomilism might actually totally replace Orthodoxy, where the Kievan Rus would then somehow convert to Bogomilism, but we don't know. So that's it for this scenario, and it was a very interesting one, but I think that a long-lasting union between the Frankish and the Byzantine Empire with the marriage between Charlemagne and Irene is too far-fetched, too ASB, and thus impossible. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed my video. Be sure to like and subscribe, leave a comment, support me also on Patreon, and join my forum, forum.planetalthistory.ga. Until next time on Planet Alt History.